But for now, let us move on to this week's national and international stories where I don't even have a quick headlines section to go through because it is such a packed week of stories. And I want to begin on Monday, where Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky came to the White House to visit with President Trump. And this time he brought reinforcements after a contentious meeting with Trump and Vance earlier this year. So, this from The Hill. Major European leaders, including German Chancellor Friedrich Merz, French President Emmanuel Macron, British Prime Minister Keir Starmer, and Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni, were all in attendance, and so were European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen and NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte. By and large, they succeeded in their two intertwined aims to make sure there was no repeat of the earlier Oval Office humiliation and defending Kiev's interests more broadly. So, the interim ceasefire, which Europe has proposed, and Trump, until his meeting with Putin last week, was also in favor of. Prior to this, meeting in Alaska, Trump wanted Russia and Ukraine to quickly agree to a ceasefire, which would then set stage for a more comprehensive peace talks. After Anchorage, he appeared to have shifted in Putin's direction, suggesting that it would be better to move to a full settlement without any halfway measures. Trump vouched for Putin's desire to make peace, and actually, during the meeting, took time to call Putin himself personally to see if they can arrange a trilateral meeting between the Russian and Ukrainian presidents and Trump. They have not been able to arrange that to this point. Let's see. Who do I come back to now? Riley, is it your turn? Thoughts on this meeting compared to the last one?
I don't have a whole lot of things to say about this one in particular, but I believe that Trump thought he was going to, have this art of the deal and this great meeting, and he was gonna get exactly what he wanted. And then after that meeting, and Putin really pressing in on him and saying, "No, this is how it's going to be done," he and the rest of his staff visibly looked frazzled. So he's really not the great leader that he thinks he is, and he's definitely not the great negotiator that he thinks he is.
Yeah. Oh, Leslie, did you see him showing off his hat collection to Zelensky?
No, thankfully I missed that. But there are a couple of points I'd like to make. I loved Ursula von der Leyen's comment that Ukraine needs to become a steel porcupine, indigestible. And honestly, I suggest that for all of us, we need to become steel porcupines. And also, I recently watched a documentary that was made in 1991 about Trump, and he's just doing the same things he has always done. When he bought Mar-a-Lago, he wanted, Palm Beach to move their airport so that the planes didn't go over Mar-a-Lago. I mean, it's the same thing. He just doubles down, bigger and bigger and bigger. He makes these blustering, claims that are just so audacious that people have tended to be bowled over. But we need to just stand firm, and that's really the only way. That's the only way. And he clearly has dementia. Clearly has dementia. Clearly.
Jesse, why should Hoosiers care about this issue? Why should we care about Ukraine?
Yeah, I think it's a good question, and I might have some differences of opinions with some folks on this call. But I think that when we see a dictatorship like Russia invading another country, we want to see resistance to that. But I think what we need to resist is the dictatorship, which naturally leads to militarism and leads to war. And is it justifiable to declare martial law and suspend elections in the face of an invasion of your country? I think that's somewhat reasonable. I think most people think that's okay. But a Gallup poll came out earlier in August that says 70% of Ukrainians want a negotiated end to this war, not to keep fighting. And so, Trump is trying to make a bunch of political hay off of his, oh, I'm the peace president. I'm trying to end wars. I'm not the one who wants to do all this meddling around. I want to try to leave NATO. I want all this stuff. and yet he's still trying to organize a trilateral agreement. What does the United States have to do with that war, right? If it's not, in fact, somewhat of a proxy war against Russia. And now, of course, Trump wants to be on Russia's side in that war. And so now he's wanting it to be a proxy war against Ukraine. But either way, this is the United States meddling and adding fuel to the fire and increasing war, devastation, and death. Ukraine deserves to have all of their own territory. Russia does not deserve to be rewarded for, invading another country. But at the same time, we need, international agreements, something like the UN, but more democratic and better, where we could peacefully resolve these things. I think it was a good thing that a bunch of European leaders got involved so that we could make this a more diffuse group of people. But it does trouble me when a bunch of European leaders are like, hey, we know someday we might have to fight Russia, so let's just keep throwing Ukrainian bodies into the meat gristle, right? The mill. I don't know what weird combination of phrases I just used there, but I think my point. Like I used to work with a bunch of colleagues who were based in Ukraine, and they were patriotic. They hated Russia. They wanted to fight. But at a certain point, all of your uncles have been killed. Your grandpa's been killed. Now your younger, people are getting drafted, and you don't have elections anymore. And you haven't for 3 years in your country. Most of my friends, and this was over a year ago, were trying to figure out how to escape and illegally leave Ukraine, not how they could enlist and fight. I just think that war, until we're talking class war, every war is actually to the detriment of working people, and we should be seeking peace. That doesn't mean capitulation to dictatorship, but we're increasingly seeing dictatorship on both sides of that war. And so I think that a negotiated peace, not with Trump in charge of it, but a negotiated peace that also works towards disarmament and dismantling the undemocratic institutions that are propping people like Putin up, that's what we actually need.
Trump had a little, little go with Zelensky about not having elections, and he's like, "Yeah, you like that, don't you?" It sort of seemed like, "Hey, I kind of like this too. That maybe seems like a good idea." And this is what I worry about. He's like, "Oh, you're at war. You don't have elections. Maybe we should be at war and not have elections." Very worried about that. So,